Hello and welcome. I am Kim Keen, host of the One of a Kind You podcast. I started this podcast to share my journey of my past self, a woman who was struggling with leaving her teaching career and adjusting to stay-at-home mom life, to help other women with their motherhood journeys or their work-life balance journeys so they can let go, make themselves a priority without all the sacrificing. So if you are a regular listener to One of a Kind You, thank you so much for tuning into another episode. I'm so happy that you're here. And if you're new, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for taking a chance and to stop by and see what this podcast has to offer. The way this podcast usually works is that I share a journal entry of mine from about 5 or 6 years ago when I was in the thick of the struggle and what I wish I had known then and what I know now as a certified life coach. But today I have a special guest with us. Her name is Barbara LaPointe, and she is a coach, and she is also an author, and she is also a fellow podcaster, and she's a mom. So Barbara wears lots of hats, and I'm going to let her tell us a little bit more about herself and fill in anything that I missed. So thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us on One of a Kind You.
It's an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to share this space with you and your audience.
Yes, yes. And I've had the privilege to talk with Barbara before because I was actually on her podcast, Hope Filled Highlights. So be sure to check that podcast out. We'll have the link in the show notes, all things Barbara to reach out to get the ebook that she has, to get to her podcast, her website. Don't worry, all of that will be in the show notes so that you don't have to go down the Google rabbit hole trying to find her. But yeah, so podcast, what would you like to chat about first, Barbara? Podcast, ebook, coaching?
Oh, well, I just love the way you are just laying this all out, making my life so easy.
Oh,
It's
good.
so easy, and it's just flowing between us already.
Yes.
And and you know what? We're going to talk today a little bit about conflict.
Mm,
And so already the energy between us is the opposite energy of the topic today, which is conflict, conflict languaging, and a conflict energy or conflict paradigm. So it's fun. Yes, I'm looking forward to our talk. And yeah.
yeah. So your ebook is called.
My ebook is called Erased by a Narcissist: One Woman's Journey to Divorcing a High Conflict Personality.
Mhm.
It's totally free on my website, barbaralapointe.com. So free gift for your audience. And it outlines my journey, but it also has a lot of my journey divorcing a very high conflict personality and his very high conflict lawyer, because often these personalities will attract like attracts like,
Mhm.
attract or they'll invite a lawyer that has similar values, conflict values, to join them. So, but the great thing about the ebook is it's packed with helpful tips to deal with difficult situations in divorce or just a common law separation or a breakup. It's packed with tips to deal with family court and tips on how to avoid or reduce conflict. Um, so yes, let's back up a bit. I'm a life coach, and I love what I bring to the table because I have a background in inherited family trauma.
Mhm.
I was fortunate enough to train directly with Mark Wolin. He wrote an amazing book called "It Didn't Start with You." So
Mm.
a lot of times in my practice, when I see women, um, families who've gone through severe abuse, there's a whole sort of behind the scenes hidden picture. And often it starts up in our family tree,
Mm.
whether it's our mom or our dad, even our grandparents. So that's something unique that I offer. And that's my case. I have a whole inherited family tree of family trauma with energy lines and family pattern lines of uh, conflict, abuse, and um, and it manifested at one point in my own family, in my own marriage. So I'm really truly the heroine of my own family, as that is on washed down the river now. And I try to spend most of my time passionately supporting others to get through it. I'm also a New Ways for Families practitioner, and New Ways for Families is a program that helps families find new ways for dealing with old problem personalities or old problems. And so a lot of what we'll be addressing today in our talk comes directly from the High Conflict Institute in Southern California. And New Ways for Families is a program offered through the High Conflict Institute in Southern California.
Wow. So I relate so much to what you said about the generational aspect of conflict, because I also have many lines going back of that generational conflict, trauma, and on both sides of my family. So my dad's side, it goes back many generations, and then on my mom's side too. So I resonate very much with you with what you said about how that can show up at different points in life, and how it all continues to sort of manifest until you actually become the heroine of your own journey and you change that narrative. So when you were married to your husband, did you see the high conflict behaviors earlier, or did they start after you were married?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. Well, you know what? I was unconscious to it, and I had a lot of early programming in how I would bring my part to the conflict. And my part was blocking it out, ignoring it, being very submissive. And that's actually how I moved through a lot of conflict in my life, and because in every situation, because one thing that's true, and we know now, is that we all run into conflict,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's major or minor. We're for sure all going to encounter high conflict personalities. In fact, 1 in 25 people are a high conflict personalities, and I would suggest that's a moderate stat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my way of dealing with conflict in my marriage and in every area of my life for many years was to avoid it. Just run, hide, avoid it, please, please, please.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very much a people pleaser, and I did everything to avoid conflict. And and that has its own price, but
Yeah.
when you come head on to something, you can't avoid it anymore. And sometimes that happens for us in divorce. And what I notice is that when it happens for us in divorce, it's like a cascade of explosions, because it takes us back to earlier conflicts, earlier uh, experiences of abuse, earlier dysfunction,
Mm-hmm.
back, our first experience of abandonment. And we deal all with it through all timelines in our divorce. And that is a lot to process for women. And that's why we need support. But it's neat, because if you do process it, and I'm blessed to see lots of women and meet lots of people actually like yourself. I call them circuit breakers,
Mm-hmm.
because they are the ones that are just jamming the circuits and changing all of the energy lines forward for their children, for
Mm-hmm.
future generations.
Mm-hmm.
They're the circuit breakers, and those are powerful, sometimes called black sheep. They're just powerful, powerful humans.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Mm-hmm. What, if you don't mind me asking, what woke you up to the narcissistic high conflict behavior? Because if you try to avoid it for so long, what got you to the breaking point where you're like, oh my gosh, I see it now. There's no more ignoring it. There's no more running and hiding, and I can't do this anymore.
This was a very, very long journey, but at a certain point I felt like a little bit, I'd always been a stay-at-home mom. So I did feel like I was yearning for more.
Mm-hmm.
And I started an incredible consciousness building path called life coaching. And
Yes.
and so I went through many years of intensive life coaching with Erickson International. And then I did my neuro-linguistic programming
Mm-hmm.
certification, so on and so forth. So that what this does is it kind of changes you radically, and it
Yes.
changes your core. And when I came to the height of that journey, the pinnacle, and identified freedom as my core value, because so much clarity can come forth when we align with our values, and we begin to know what are our most important values that we need to live by. Well, for me, Kim, that was freedom.
Mm-hmm.
That made me one of a kind. And I filed for divorce. And when
Wow.
yeah, and when I filed for divorce, World War III in my world broke out.
I can only imagine because I'm sure he was not expecting that.
Yes, and he wasn't. And when you deal with a high conflict personality, they deal with conflict by being power assertive,
Hmm.
just the opposite way that we started this podcast. So there's no collaboration. There's no, like as Stephen R. Covey would describe, a win-win situation. So it was very much some classic narcissistic qualities that quickly came to the table to play. And it was
Barbara, can you give, sorry to interrupt you, can you give us some examples of that classic narcissistic behavior? Because I think sometimes the word narcissist is thrown around so loosely now. It's like one of those trendy buzzwords. And I question I question how many people actually know what a true narcissist is or what a true narcissist acts like. So can you just give us like a quick snippet of like those typical narcissistic behaviors?
I'd love to, Kim, because it's such a fascinating topic, and I agree with you. It's a topic that's in the collective consciousness, and most times when I'm talking and referring to a narcissist, I'm talking to an extreme cases because it is a spectrum.
Hmm.
Another lovely way to say it is high conflict personality because it also covers more of a spectrum. But these
Hmm.
are personalities, to answer your question, Kim, that are grandiose, that enjoy conflict. It fuels them. In fact, one study showed that a narcissist heart rate actually slows down during a conflict or an attack that they're making.
Really?
Yeah, and
It's the
ours,
opposite for everyone else.
yes. So that sets the playing field unfair in my view from the beginning.
Yes.
They are master manipulators and they
Hmm.
manipulate family lawyers, they manipulate professionals. They're blame shifters. Bill Eddy from the High Conflict Institute calls them the arrogant players of divorce. So divorce or a breakup very much means game on, the war is on. Whereas a lot of times women will be thinking, well, when I end the marriage or when I break up, things will begin to get better for me,
Hmm.
because it's probably taken them a long time to get to that point. It did take me years. Well, it's the opposite with a narcissist because things begin to get worse. And the post legal abuse and the post abuse from the point of the breakup it intensifies.
Mm.
So there's a lot of attacking, demeaning, insulting, belittling, taking away a woman's power um,
Hmm.
through time. And you might notice this in their behavior. You might notice this in papers that they file in terms of affidavits. You'll start to notice this attack languaging, and that's what I call it. The High Conflict Institute would call it conflict language or conflict languaging from these high conflict personalities. And the reason why there's an attack is because they have this pattern through life. It's enduring, it's not one time, of all or nothing thinking, very much black and white thinking. And in practical terms, we can make it like this. We can say it like this. I get angry, unmanaged emotions in brackets. I take revenge. And that's that black and white thinking playing out in real life. So they have these unmanaged emotions, whether it be anger, sadness from childhood, but their emotions are unregulated. And that's why they can flip very quickly into the opposite of constructive conflict resolution, attacking through lawyers, abuse, and it takes all form. So
Hmm.
narcissistic abuse is really challenging because especially through a divorce or breakup, it's enduring. It's
Hmm.
enduring. So what else about high conflict personalities?
Do you
They
think
don't.
that it's
Mhm.
also a challenge because does it tend to be more covert or is it overt? So like are they really good at doing it kind of on the down low? So then if you were to say to someone, hey, I'm experienced this, there really wouldn't be sort of any evidence and people are like, what are you talking about? I don't see that happening to you. Or is it more blatant where it's like they're going to slash your tires or, follow you around, when you're out running errands or something like that? Or can it be both?
It can be both, but I think for the context of our conversation, it would be more overt or more hidden, not overt, the opposite, where there is no evidence, where someone's looking at this person, the narcissist or HCP, high conflict personality, and they're saying, well, he looks really great. He's so put together.
Hmm.
He always seems really polite because they're often charming,
Hmm.
charismatic, convincing. So those can be very attractive and valued qualities in our society.
Hmm.
And so they are charismatic. So everything looks okay from the outside.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and that is often referred to in social media terms as gaslighting,
Yes.
where behind in the hidden scenes, this person is wreaking havoc on
Hmm.
another's life. And it's not an exaggeration or a hyperbole to say that these type of narcissists or HCPs are dangerous people.
Hmm.
They're
Yeah.
dangerous people. They wreak havoc in family court. They wreak havoc in women's lives. They wreak havoc in divorce. They do another quality of them, Kim, is that they don't often, almost never, very unlikely that they're going to go to therapy because they're arrogant, they're grandiose. They're not going to go to therapy, whereas someone like you or I would be first to sign up for therapy because
Yes.
we're works in progress. We're coaches,
Yes.
they're never going to go to therapy. In the unlikely case that a narcissist said, yeah, I'm going to go to therapy, or got forced through a diagnosis to go into therapeutic process. It is estimated by the High Conflict Institute that it takes 5 years minimum and most often fails so for them to change their behavior.
Wow. 5 years. That's a long time.
Yeah. So
And I guess
these are,
maybe even longer if they're arrogant and don't think that there's anything wrong with their behavior.
yeah, why would they go to therapy?
Right.
So back to their blame shifting, and what they do is they place a target on someone's back, hopefully not yours, but their partner's back. And so that's where they shift their blame. It's your fault. This is your fault. I'm angry. You deserve revenge. And it starts eroding a person's confidence, self-esteem, all of those good feeling emotions. And then it starts affecting a woman's identity when she's in this process for a long, long time.
Hmm.
So another major characteristic is placing a target on a woman's back through divorce.
Yeah. Well, and I just have to say, listening to all of this, you're so courageous for identifying your value of freedom and then making the choice to go through with the divorce. Because I can't imagine that that was easy for you, and then especially not when things escalate going through the divorce. So I just can't imagine how challenging that must have been.
It was it's been quite a journey. So I did 7 years, um, over 5 years of daily litigation, and
Wow.
so when interestingly enough, I do a lot of reading, and recently I was reading the stat that when a narc targets you, it will usually last for about 3.5 years,
Whoa.
statistically. So at 3.5 years, my ex-spouse amped everything up and intensified things. And then he filed to remove all of my parenting rights
Wow.
around religion, around custody, around medical. Now, back up, I had a background my entire life of being a stay-at-home mom,
Hmm.
2 children. Um, I worked in the community in the vulnerable sector with children. And I'd spent many, many years teaching art to children. Okay, there's a painting behind me. So can you imagine when I was called an unfit mother
Yeah.
and to have all of my parenting rights removed? So through this process, there were many times where I couldn't even buy groceries because
Mhm.
literally all my money was going to a family lawyer.
Yeah, that's just unbelievable. I mean, my skin is literally crawling right now at the fact that at 3.5 years, it it wasn't done. It was really almost on some level just beginning. And that was already after 8 years of marriage. So now you're 11 and a half years into this journey.
Yeah, that was, closer to 18 years of marriage. Yeah,
Oh,
and they
wow.
went through 3.5 years of divorce, and it took me about 3 hard years before I filed. At 3.5 years, he amped it up to a high conflict custody battle, and, that took a long time to resolve, a couple more years, and so the point is that it just kinda never stops. So
Hmm.
the definition that might be relevant to give right now of high conflict is a personality that doesn't come to the table through time. It's an enduring pattern of behavior, whereas instead of resolving conflict,
Yeah.
they are or reducing it, they're inciting conflict. They're excited by conflict. They're creating conflict,
Mhm.
and it's a continuous repeated pattern of behavior that's extremely destructive. This is an intense conversation for breakfast time.
Yes.
I'm glad you're still with me. So
Yes, I am, because this, um, well, first of all, it needs to be talked about. But secondly, I think it's fascinating because people don't have the awareness. And so the more that we have the awareness and we learn about these types of behaviors and these tendencies and what triggers them, then we can do more to help ourselves and to help our children and, to be that circuit breaker. So I'm always fascinated. I'm very much in fascinated, and this is, I guess, where coaching is a good fit for me. Is that I'm always fascinated with why do people do what they do? How do people get to where they are in life based on the life experiences that they've had? So I always think, like, what happened in their life for them to develop these narcissistic characteristics, or was it something that they were born with?
yeah, it's really interesting. It's a fascinating topic. I have a private Facebook group for women called Narcissism 101 for Women. And one thing that I see often is women, two things. Like you, they get curious and they're investigating it and they're trying to figure out how it started. But honestly, the quicker you get to healing is the quicker you move your energy field back to yourself
Hmm.
and start just trying to figure out why are you involved in this? Why are you playing your part,
Hmm.
enmeshed, codependent, whatever words you want to use
Yes.
within this. And a lot of times that's slowed down for women, Kim.
Hmm.
And I encourage women to just start saying, okay, focusing in here for that quantum emotional healing and figuring out your own patterns. The second thing I see in my group is that women will go, once they start getting awareness and deeper understanding, oh, this is not the first one. And they have a whole collection of
Yes.
narcissists in their lives.
I can imagine, because as much as the narcissist is running the pattern, we're running the pattern too of attracting those people into our lives because we are doing that to meet our own needs, or because it's what we are conditioned to believe we're deserving of, or it's what feels comfortable and safe because that's the environment that we grew up in.
So it comes right back to where we began with inherited family trauma or early trauma
Hmm.
experienced. So we can begin then to start stepping in and doing those compassionate inquiries for ourselves
Hmm.
and just going, oh, I'm getting, like you said, as a coach, but anyone can do this, just getting really very curious about where this began, the place of origin.
Hmm.
Most women will, so I interviewed 25 women who received or were the recipients of severe narcissistic abuse
Hmm.
in the USA, and they all had severe early trauma, and they were all essentially, to say it simply, abused as children.
Hmm.
So I thought that was fascinating, and most oftentimes too, you're going to find a parent that was exhibiting some of these behaviors.
Hmm. Yeah. I think, and it's probably, if the parent is exhibiting the behaviors, it probably even goes back to their parent or maybe even a grandparent, because I don't think it's something that just develops like that. I think it's learned over a period of time. And so without that awareness, we keep repeating the same problem or pattern over and over. because on some level we just don't know any better, or it doesn't occur to us that it's really not serving us.
Yeah, that all takes a lot of cultivation of our awareness, our consciousness, and then to me, one of the most powerful layers you could bring to it is exactly what you're talking about, is the investigation into our family tree, multiple um is the words escaping me, multiple lineages, our grandparents' parents. And when you shake down the family tree, Kim, it's amazing what comes out. It is amazing. And it's true.
Yes.
Sometimes we are playing our part. Sometimes it is us still, but at the same time, the paradox is sometimes it doesn't even belong to us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sometimes this has been going on and we're like, wow, this has been going on since my ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
No wonder I behave like this, or no wonder I have a child that doesn't, and I'm not married. Well, been a whole matriarchal lineage prior to me where this has been, so it's fun to collapse the timelines instead of just looking at it in a bigger way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think too, it's, so when I started my healing journey, I did not know. It was because I left my teaching career and I thought I was having an identity crisis. And so I went to therapy because I was not thinking very productive thoughts about my life, because I was struggling with being a stay-at-home mom, because I was so connected to that identity of kindergarten teacher. And so I was like, oh, I should probably go talk to someone. And at that time, I didn't know life coaching was a thing. So I went to a therapist. And in that time, and she was like, do you know you're codependent? Do you know that you are anxious? Do you know that you suffer from childhood emotional neglect? I didn't have any awareness of those words. I never heard the word codependent before. I never heard the word enmeshed before. But then when she used those words, it was like the light bulb went ding ding. I was like, oh, I see it now. And I know it's because of this on my dad's side of the family. And I know it's because of this on my mom's side of the family. And then I can even throw my stepmom's family in the mix and my stepdad's family in the mix. And when you bring all of that together, it's like, no wonder. But it was the blessing in that was then I had the awareness of those words. I had the awareness to say, like, oh, okay, all of this is mine because I've been inadvertently given it. It's an unintended gift, so to speak.
Mhm.
And I didn't know that I was gifted those things, but I don't really like that present. So I'm making a choice to return it to the store, and we're not going to engage in that any longer. And so that was really the journey. I
That's
didn't
amazing.
know.
Yeah. You had so many like kaboom light bulb moments, or like where pieces of the puzzles were fitting in, where you said, no wonder, no
Yes.
wonder. And
Yeah.
then you start to get a little bit freer and a little bit freer. I'm glad you brought up that word, Kim, codependency, because yeah, I would say probably anyone who has been with a narcissist is codependent and would
Mm-hmm.
identify with that label. These are all labels that we're using, even
Yes.
narcissist, but it gives us a start.
Yeah,
And
for
when
sure.
we really start healing, we just remove all the labels.
Yes. And that was what I did not know at the time. And so I became so obsessed with those labels. And that was not a serving strategy, to be obsessed with the labels. Because then it was like, well, I'm just like this because I'm codependent, or I'm just like this because I'm anxious, or I'm just like this because of childhood emotional neglect. That was really not good. I was more miserable then after the labels than I was before the labels. So it was like I needed to let go of the labels and say, I am not those things. I'm running a pattern of that. I'm running a pattern of this, but I am not those things.
Mhm. Yeah, that's when we start to get really empowered, when we realize we're not those things, as you say,
Hmm.
we're not our labels. We're all one, so they're not their labels, and
Hmm.
we're not our thoughts. Because and so yeah, and I just see like your face relaxing as I
Yeah.
say that, and then as you start to feel that, then you can deepen it and deepen it. But yeah, it's totally it's a process through time.
Hmm.
Self-love, it's self-love and self-healing,
Hmm.
emotional release process. As I see this often in my group and in my practice too, where people are like, it does feel empowering at first when we go, oh, that's codependency, and this is why, and then over time, we deepen it and it becomes something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
the blessing of doing this work.
yes. Yes. And so I'm so, in the moment I was so angry, but now with the distance and the time, I'm so grateful because now I know I have the vocabulary, I have the language, and I don't have to continue to engage in that. I can let that go. It gives me the awareness and the recognition, and I don't have to pass it on to my kids. I don't have to allow it to continue to show up in my relationship with my husband or friendships or anything like that. But the time part was also a big struggle because I thought, okay, I know and it's healed and that's it, it's done. And when it was years of doing this work and years of being able to let go of these labels, there were times where I was like, oh my God, I wish I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you take a pause button and it can be overwhelming.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it can be overwhelming. But that is neat when you start out the journey, and then you can take breaks and you can be soft with yourself, and then you can restart and keep going. Um yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about some of the strategies that you use. So you have, well, mindfulness is one of the strategies, the tools that you suggest, but then you also have something BIFF.
Okay, that'd be awesome. So let's back up just one quick step. I
Sure.
just want to just acknowledge you because you were able to take this transformation journey. And just to point out, in the context of our conversation, that's something the narcissist can't do because of this inflexible all or nothing thinking. So they
Hmm.
can't do what we did.
Hmm.
They can't go from broken to whole, from
Hmm.
broken to empowered. They can't do that, and they lack empathy. So the first point for me was that 3.5 years into the daily legal proceedings, where I learned the label narcissist. And it gave me like an entry point to start understanding this high conflict behavior.
Hmm.
Um, at a certain point, I learned a strategy called the Biff Strategy,
Hmm.
and that is a high conflict institute strategy created by the most renowned and respected person, Bill Eddy, author, psychologist, mediator. And Biff is just a way that we can deal with anyone in the workplace, bedroom, marriage, home, or anyone to deal with a high conflict personality. I use it all the time now. So BIF stands for brief, informative, firm, and friendly. I always add on, we shouldn't be too friendly and definitely very firm,
Hmm.
but brief, informative. So it's really like a business note, and you can perfect writing these BIF notes all the time because they don't come naturally. Because again, when we're attacked, what do?
We either get defensive or we retreat.
Yeah, defensive, we retreat and we take it personally too.
Hmm.
Like it feels all very personal. So instead of writing an emotionally charged response that might be reactive, we take that 48 hours to just not communicate at all and take a break, come into our present moment self, and come back with a BIF strategy or a BIF structured email for high conflict people in the workplace or divorce. That's brief, informative, firm, and friendly. It's totally unemotional. It's very, very short. And there's nothing to respond to. There's nothing to attack back to. And it will just reduce your legal bill, reduce conflict, keep everyone accountable. Like they're really, really great. And if you're going through a divorce, a little trick that I add on is to find a family lawyer that also uses the BIF strategy.
Hmm.
Those are like finding a needle in a haystack, but there's nothing to have a conflict about. That's how precise and clear and non-emotional a BIF email is.
Yeah. And I think that's the interesting takeaway is that you have to find someone who is aligned with your values. Because sometimes if we take that, find an attorney who is high conflict and then they're going at someone else who is high conflict, it's just the whole thing is gonna explode and be far more catastrophic than when you have one person who can take the Biff approach and not engage back in that explosive confrontational way.
Yeah. It sounds easier to do than not because we
Yeah.
can, especially if we're empathetic, we're
Hmm.
emotional, we're hurt, we're wounded, we haven't gone through this transformational journey first. We might want to defend ourselves.
Hmm.
We're hurt. It hurts.
Yeah.
And you can even do this in the workplace with a boss, just it's editing down your email to 2 sentences, 4 sentences that are necessary.
Yeah.
So brief,
That
informative, firm, and friendly.
Yeah, I think that's key because I'm like, oh, I think in my mind, like I always write a novel in an email, like even if it's not confrontational, I'm always
Right.
writing a novel. So
Me
I'm like, oh,
too.
2 to 4 sentences. That sounds lovely.
Yeah. Pretend you're an editor of a book, but like we're sort of like emotionally conditioned to do that. Like I
Yeah.
feel this and I notice this. And if you want to do this, you can do that. And this might be, an on and on and on. Well, this
Yes.
just is a really bad strategy with high conflict people. Now, if you and I were exchanging an email, we could do that. With a high conflict person, the sooner you implement the Biff strategy, and if you can get these strategies going at the beginning, it's just your outcomes are so much shinier, more shinier.
Yes. Even though I think it would probably, like, if we were emailing back and forth, it would probably behoove me to keep it short. Because sometimes my husband will say, the abridged version, Kim, or the extended version. And I'm like, ha ha, smarty pants. So even conversating. And I think that's part of, my upbringing and, the childhood experiences that I had. I was, often felt like I had to explain myself and justify and give every minute detail of the day, where my husband didn't grow up like that. So it's, I always joke and say he had, his family had the white picket fence around the yard, even though that's not true. But in comparison to my upbringing, his was vastly different, a lot less conflict, a lot less, and a lot less dysfunction than what I grew up with. So I think that even in a friendly, non-confrontational conversation, I still share way too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. Like boundaries and then just being unapologetically who we are. We
Yes.
don't excuse me, we don't have to justify our existence on the planet. We don't have to justify who we are, what we want, our nose with a reason behind it, and as women, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, because you deal with young girls, but as women, we are more vulnerable to this type of early programming, and it,
Hmm.
it blocks our power. It
Yes.
blocks us from speaking our personal truth.
Yes. And that's why, with my after school program, I'm working so diligently to give the girls those tools to establish boundaries, to understand that they don't have to justify and explain away every single thing about themselves, that they can show up just the way they are, and that is more than enough. Because I know from my own experience how stressful it is to always feel like you have to be on and always explaining and always justifying and making sure, like, oh my gosh, it's 1:15 and I should have been home 10 minutes ago, and they're going to think this or they're going to think that. And when that's not, it doesn't need to be that way. And that's not the case. So helping them to program themselves now as younger girls to be empowered and understand their own strength, physical strength, but also emotional and mental strength, but
Mhm.
also their worth and their value, so that they don't compromise on that when they're older.
Yeah, I just love this program that you have for the empowerment of young girls because that's going to make all the difference in their lives. But because the bottom line is when you're grounded in your own power, when you know how to make a solid, non-porous boundary, um, you're empowered, you're
Hmm.
strong, and you can serve and preserve your own life force instead of constantly letting it leak out.
Yes. Yes. So, Barbara, how, if someone does not currently have a mindfulness practice, what would be one thing that they could do to start developing that?
Sure. Well, I guess after all this, taking our entire conversation into consideration, we talked a lot about the emotional damage of a narcissist, how it impacts our self-esteem,
Hmm.
how to get our personal power back, how to stand in our truth, how to use effective strategies like a Biff. We've covered a lot of territory. but one thing that was consistent is building that awareness or self-awareness to start to make some of these positive changes. So one thing you can do for yourself to heal and get some of your personal power back and to understand the dynamics and to build your awareness and also to bring that peace back, that peace, like peace in your heart that's been stolen away, is a small mini mindfulness practice. Your own mindfulness practice where you're just taking a few moments at the beginning until you build momentum. And really the core of it is bringing all your present moment life force or energy back to yourself and just bringing, you know, your soul to a present moment that's just for you. So it's, how did that sound? It's just like coming to your present moment point of power and awareness, centering in your heart, centering down deep in your pelvic floor, or some might call it your root chakra, feet planted on the ground, and just allowing your breath to come in all the way down and cleanse, and then releasing what you'd mentioned earlier, Kim, when you breathe out, just releasing anything that's not serving us, and just being mindful to the miracle of life. Because a lot of us go through life, but we never experience the miracles that are possible in life. So mindfulness is a gift that you can start cultivating in your life.
One of the things that I do is, especially if I'm outside and I feel like, you know, I have that rushing kind of energy, like, oh, I have to do this and I have to do this. Occasionally there will be an owl outside that hoots. And it's as soon as I hear him, whoo, 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 it immediately snaps me back. And I just focus on listening to him make his noise. And I just listen for just a couple seconds. And that sometimes will be enough to bring me back to being present in that moment. And sometimes it's just walking barefoot on the grass.
I love it. That's beautiful. What's it? The hoot is a great way to anchor it into your system. And yeah, the earthing with your feet on the grass, amazing. Yeah, and you know, you might be really sensitive to the hearing and extending out your hearing. How far can I hear? What sounds do I love? And others might be sight, just focusing on one thing of peace in the room, whether it's an angel or a crystal or a rock or a flower or your daughter's picture, son's picture. And others, it might be more somatic, or, you know, where they're just tapping their heart in the butterfly pose, giving themselves a hug to calm down. Like you said, rushing around. We do live in such like an adrenaline society that we even have like forgotten how powerful we are, and we've forgotten how to just earth, how to calm down in this adrenaline rushing pattern.
Yeah. I think the suggestion that you gave for starting a mindfulness practice is just simply wonderful, because it's doable. It doesn't feel overwhelming, because I think some people think, oh, I can never even start that because my mind is always racing, or I have too much to do and I just can't. And so this is just such a simple way. It's something that doesn't take a lot of time. It literally just takes 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and to get you to reconnect and tap back into who you are.
You know what? I like that, Kim. And I think you're right, because it's simple, it's short. I never thought of it that way. And sometimes if I were to say to you, Kim, why don't you go into meditation? Well, a lot of times people are like, meditation. I like what, you know, it's like intimidating. I don't know how to meditate. I'm right. And but just mindfulness, just one thing. Another thing is I used to wear a crystal, or like an amethyst here, or a crystal you like, whatever, a diamond. And then if I held it, you could do that. Just hold your necklace, and that could be like an anchor, like the owl hooting. But mindfulness, short periods of time throughout the day will build up a momentum of more peacefulness, more present moment awareness. And I would say the foremost teacher on mindfulness, he just passed away, is the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. So give him a Google if you want to, you know, get even more mindfully aware.
Yes, just an amazing human being with all his wisdom and knowledge about mindfulness.
Yeah.
So incredible, so powerful, and it's such a great resource. This has been lovely chatting. I feel like I've learned so much today, and I know that my listeners will definitely learn something too.
I
And
hope so.
so, if people, after visiting and reading your ebook, or following you on social, if they have questions, is it okay to send you a message, maybe on Instagram or through Facebook, or are you open to that?
Yeah, I'm so active on social media. You can follow me on TikTok, Facebook. My website is barbaralapointe.com. I have a free downloadable PDF on mindfulness for women on my website, in addition to the free ebook. And my YouTube channel hosts the Healing Broken Families podcast. And I'm always live on there responding to real-time problems, challenges, questions. So I welcome it.
Amazing. Yes. Okay. Fantastic. So, with that being said, be sure you go to the show notes, you get the ebook, you go to the website, you get the PDF, you go watch YouTube, you do all the things, and you just go right to the show notes, and it's all right there. So you don't have to go searching all over. So one-stop shopping to get to Barbara. She is a wealth of knowledge, an amazing resource. So be sure to take advantage of that. Thank you again, Barbara, for being a guest on One of a Kind You. I'm so, so grateful that you took the time to be here with us today.
I'm honored, Kim. You're amazing, and wishing everyone healing solutions. And this was a lot of fun.
Oh,
Healing is fun. Thank you.
yes, thank you. And you're equally amazing. So if you found this episode helpful, please feel free to share it with a friend, because the more the merrier. And if you would be so kind to leave a review, I take the time to read all the reviews myself to ensure that this podcast continues to be a resource, a place of support, a place of guidance, really one-stop shopping, because let's face it, us women have to stick together, us moms have to stick together. So thank you so much for tuning into another episode, and I will see you next week.